Agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The Prime Minister's statement to Parliament for 2010 is published under the authority of the House, and copies are available on the table. I call on Government Order of the Day.
Debate on the Prime Minister's statement.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I move that this House expresses its confidence in the National-led government and commend its program for 2010 as set out in the Prime Minister's statement to Parliament. Mr Speaker, the government starts the year with a very full program in front of it. Our driving goal is to lead a step change in New Zealand's economic performance so that we can deliver New Zealanders the jobs, increased incomes.
I apologise to the Prime Minister for intervening so early in his statement, but I'd just ask the House to recognise that this is a very important debate, and I expect courtesies to be extended to the Leader of the Opposition when he speaks, and I expect courtesy to be extended to the Prime Minister when he delivers his speech. I'm not ruling out interjection, but I think it should be reasonable. I'd ask all members to be reasonable so that the public can hear a speech they want to hear. I thank members.
Mr Speaker, our driving goal is to lead a step change in New Zealand's economic performance so that we can deliver New Zealanders the jobs, increased incomes and better living standards they deserve. In recent times, New Zealand's incomes have fallen further and further behind the countries we like to compare ourselves with, including Australia. This year, the government will make a large number of economic reforms to turn this around. These will include changes to the tax system, reforms in the public sector, changes to our science and innovation system, unlocking access to our abundant natural resources, and measures to improve firms' access to capital. The government's other priority this year is to make significant changes to improve service delivery in social sectors like welfare, education, justice and health. We owe this not just to the people who rely on these important public services, but to all taxpayers who fund them. What's more, it's time New Zealand came to grips with some of the big social problems that persist in our communities, including welfare dependence, crime and other social dysfunction. I have outlined the details of this program of economic and social reform in a statement that has been published to this House. I urge the members to read that statement in full. Let me today take the opportunity to address some parts of that statement. Mr Speaker, starting with tax. This year the government will make significant changes to the New Zealand tax system. We will announce the details of these measures as part of the budget in May. We want a tax system that drives economic growth and the creation of jobs, that creates incentives for people to work hard and to get ahead in New Zealand, that boosts savings and increases the productivity of investment, that is regarded as fair and relatively simple to administer. We agree with the tax working group that this is not currently the case. In particular, we agree that New Zealand relies heavily on taxes most harmful to growth, particularly corporate and personal income taxes, that there is a hole in the tax base around the taxation of property, that the tax system lacks integrity and fairness because of differences in the treatment of entities, and that there is significant risk to the sustainability of the tax revenue base. Mr Speaker, tinkering over recent years has made the tax system more complicated, led to poor incentives and created a raft of different ways for people to minimise their tax payments. Given this, it is any wonder that our economy has tilted towards consumption and property investment, that we have a shortage of savings and that a high proportion of New Zealand graduates live overseas. We are looking at possible reductions across the whole personal tax structure, not just for the taxpayers on the top rate, as has been suggested by some. However, Mr Speaker, some of the reforms discussed by the tax working group are not favoured by the government and are therefore off the table. In particular, we will not be developing any proposals for a land tax, a comprehensive capital gains tax or a risk-free rate of return method for taxing residential investment properties. However, the government does believe there is a gap in the current tax system around property investments where income is being derived but in aggregate no tax is being paid. In fact, the government is actually losing revenue in this sector. Mr. Speaker, we will therefore be making changes to the way that property is taxed, which will result in increased revenue and more fairness for taxpayers. The government is also carefully considering a modest increase in the rate of GST to no more than 15%. We are acutely aware of the effect that a rise in GST could have on lower income families if not balanced out by compensatory changes elsewhere. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, if an increase were to incur, it would have to be accompanied by across-the-board reductions in personal taxes as well as upfront increases in benefits, New Zealand superannuation and working for families payments. Mr. Speaker, these changes will allow New Zealanders to take home more of their own income, and don't they deserve to do that? They could therefore, Mr. Speaker, use that income to save or to pay off their mortgage without being taxed on it. Saving and investment, Mr. Speaker, would therefore be encouraged rather than consumption. GST is also a very difficult tax to avoid, no matter how people structure their financial affairs. As David Lange once observed, even drug dealers pay GST. No final decisions have been made about raising GST, and the government has asked for more work to be done on this. But it is suffice to say the government would not embark on a policy of increasing GST unless it would benefit the New Zealand economy in the long term and unless it saw the vast bulk of New Zealanders better off. Mr. Speaker, the government is not considering a major change to the Working for Families scheme, but we are concerned that some people are using income structuring techniques to gain eligibility to a scheme that was never intended for them. This runs contrary to the policy intent, and the government is therefore looking at how to make working for families fairer in this regard. Mr. Speaker, science and innovation are also key elements of the government's economic agenda. From Weta Digital and Icebreaker through to Zespri and Fonterra, New Zealand's leading exporters have harnessed science and innovation to develop new products and improve the way they do business. The challenge for New Zealand is to get more out of our firms using science, research and technology to deliver more valuable products and services and to create new and better paid jobs for New Zealanders. We are not satisfied that the current policies are doing enough to encourage this. Therefore, in 2010, we will make changes to our public science system to increase its contribution to economic growth and to encourage firms to increase their take-up and application of research. Mr. Speaker, this will include changes to the way we invest in Crown Research Institutes, the CRIs. As I have previously outlined, the government will be keeping a tight lid on new spending over the foreseeable future, which will help keep public debt under control and keep pressure off interest rates. Even so, we have been convinced that to be effective in the long run, our reforms in the science and innovation area must be matched with a step up in public investment. Accordingly, we have made science and innovation a priority for new spending in this year's budget and a focus on boosting business research and science capability. Mr. Speaker, the government also wants to unleash the untapped economic potential of New Zealand's incredible natural resources. While Australia is sometimes described as digging its way to prosperity, New Zealanders often forget that we too have access to highly valued resources. Fertile land, petroleum, minerals and water are in particular abundance. Our challenge, Mr. Speaker, is to make more of that economic potential. In general, the government is in favour of unlocking resources for economic benefit where this is consistent with our environment